I want to start by thanking you, Rabbi Starr, for graciously inviting me to briefly discuss our recent trip to Poland and Lithuania. Also want to thank Larry Niemer and the officers for allowing me the opportunity to go as well. I was given the challenge of summarizing an 11-day trip in a few minutes. After realizing it was a near impossible task, I came to the conclusion that it was even more important to explain the purpose of this trip and why I felt compelled to participate. This was not my first trip to Poland and Lithuania. I have been to both several times. However, it was my first time as a participant of the March of the Living. It all started when the executive director, Mel Mann, of the Adult Friends of the March of the Living trip asked me to be the clergy for their experience. It came to pass after meeting a few years ago that we discovered his mother and my mother were both survivors of the Stutthof forced labor and death camp. There was an immediate bond, and we decided to include Stutthof in the pre-March itinerary. The Adult Friends of the March of the Living trip is the fundraising arm for the March of the Living and provides scholarship money to help teenagers attend the march. The March of the Living provides on-site visual educational experiences to learn about the Shoah by visiting concentration camps and ghettos where Jews were beaten, gassed, burned, and exterminated with the goal of ridding the world of the Jewish people. Many of the adults on the trip had teenagers participating in the March of the Living at the same time. You may be thinking that you know about the Holocaust because you've read books, visited Holocaust museums, seen movies like Schindler's List. Perhaps you've heard about the Shoah from family members who survived. As a child of a survivor, I thought I knew a lot about the Holocaust based on my mother's testimony. It took her many years to talk about it, but I promise you that nothing that you read, hear, or have seen is as impactful as seeing the camps and the ghettos with your own eyes. Prior to visiting the Stutthof forced labor and death camp, where my mother was taken from the Kovna ghetto at age 15 and all alone, I had no way to comprehend what she went through. After seeing the enormity of the camp and the unlivable conditions of the structures within, I walked away with a completely different sense of awe in how she could have survived. I just don't know how she managed to stay alive. It's appropriate that I'm speaking today on the exact day of her yahrzeit. From Stutthof, which was the first death camp created by the Nazis on September 2nd, 1939, and the last to be liberated on May 9th, 1945, my mom's second birthday, we joined the group of Friends of the March of the Living in Krakow to visit the Jewish Quarter, synagogues, and Auschwitz-Birkenau. The approximately 2.5-mile march from Auschwitz to Birkenau is about reenacting what was then known as the Death March. It was an emotionally moving visual to see over 12,000 mostly teenagers and some adults walk the same route where so many of our people perished during the forced walk in freezing temperatures with no food, no shoes, and barely any clothes. Organizers renamed the Death March the March of the Living with the hope to never again have a death march that killed so many of our people. It is a passing of the torch from generation to generation. As the remaining Holocaust survivors dwindle in number, it is now our challenge to keep the torch of memory burning, because what will happen when there are no survivors who are among us? Who will tell their stories? In this age of BDS and history revisionists, it is even more critical that the next generation has a clear grasp of the Shoah. The march is one of the best opportunities to give teenagers and adults the tools to keep the memory alive. Each spring, the March of the Living and its sister program, the March of Remembrance and Hope, take participants on a heart-wrenching emotional roller coaster. On the 27th of Nisan, the participants on the march solemnly observe Yom HaShoah Ugvura, Holocaust Heroes and Martyrs Remembrance Day, at Auschwitz. 1 week later, on the 4th of Iyar, they celebrate Yom HaAtzmaut, Israel's Independence Day. The majority of the participants are Jewish and include contingents from all over the world. Bill Gliad, a survivor who joined the 2009 March of the Living, spoke of his hope for those who attended the march. He eloquently expressed his thoughts as follows: In Judaism, when we go to the cemetery, it is customary to put a stone on the graves of our loved ones. It is our way to say, we are here. We haven't forgotten you. We love you. In Auschwitz, there are no tombstones. All those who perished have no monuments. Those who attend the march are like the little stones and are saying, we are here. We haven't forgotten you. We love you. After attending the march, we went to the Warsaw Jewish Cemetery and Ghetto. Warsaw had the largest Jewish population in the world after New York prior to World War II. Today, there are approximately 50,000 Jews who have recently discovered their Jewish identities. The majority of Jews learned of their secret heritage just prior to their parents or grandparents dying. Even after the fall of communism, many were still afraid to tell their children that they were, in reality, Jewish. The second largest Jewish community was in Lodz, where we had the opportunity to visit the remains of the shul, the Hever Kadisha, and cemetery. Our last stop in Poland was to visit the death camp Majdanek in Lublin. There's so much to say about Majdanek, but suffice it to say that the camp was built in the center of town, was close to homes and industry, and eerily in very good condition. I remember when our daughter Dina visited Majdanek, she astutely pointed out that at a flip of a switch, it could be operational. After that, we flew to Lithuania to visit the Vilna Ghetto, where our survivor, Sid Handler, showed us where and how he lived pre-war and how he survived during the war and post-war. The apartment where he lived was with his family was at Hakape, and where he hid, the building was still intact. It was an incredible experience to hear it firsthand from him. Our last stop was the Kovna Ghetto, where my mother was taken prior to being transported to Stutthof. It was an intense and life-changing journey for both Karen and myself. It's interesting to note that research has shown that the march deeply impacts participants over a period of many years. These include life choices like selecting a mate, outlook on life, potential of living in Israel, and charitable giving. A recent study of participants on the march found that 86% of participants asserted the importance of their spouse being Jewish. Let me say that again, because that's the largest statistic in existence of any Jewish organization in the world. 86% of the participants asserted that the importance of their spouse being Jewish is 86%, and 91% in raising their children with some sort of Jewish education. Even 65% felt the importance of raising their children in a Jewish neighborhood. Shmuel Rosenman, the founder of the March of the Living, emphasizes that the March is not a missionary organization. It is about emphasizing our past, our present, and our future. Its lesson, remember, never again, never lose faith. If you're interested in going on March of the Living trips in the future, please see me or Karen, and we'll be happy to help you. Thank you again for allowing me to share my experience with you, and may we all remember, never again, never lose faith. Shabbat Shalom.